Okay. Good afternoon. My name is John Madigan. I'm the Vice President for Public Policy for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. And it's my distinct honor to introduce the Dean of the House Mental Health Caucus, our dear friend, Grace Napolitano from California. Congresswoman, come on forward.
Thank you, my dear. Thank you very much for the invitation to be here. And I don't know about Dean. There's too many deans around here. But I'm very happy to be here and to have, as part of the Mental Health Caucus, or Mental Health Month, is trying to have a series of discussions. So it would educate and inform members of Congress of the need to be able to pass a legislation that is going to be helpful. I'm very pleased to join all the groups that advocate assistance to mental health organizations, should I say, to destigmatize the issue, because it affects millions of Americans, the young, the old. It has no barriers. It's the rich, the poor, you name it. It's something that all of us need to be aware of. And we, as you can see, we're in lime green to be able to support mental health for the month of May. An ongoing discussion, and in one of my last briefings, we asked if people were interested in having not just once a year, but ongoing briefings to be able to educate, inform, and be able to coalesce, because if we don't coalesce, then we're individually less successful. The stigma, we try to tell folks, including some of our staff, don't be afraid to ask for help, because this is something that we're finding out people are afraid to come out. The education must continue to parents, to educators, to business people, to everybody, because in the end, it's a business issue too. Billions of dollars are lost because of mental health illnesses. It harms both human and the economic cost. It's the 10th leading cause of death for Americans. And the estimate, I say it's a guesstimate, is $44 billion annually. That's a large figure. They suffer in silence, and we continue to try to make sure that when families are affected, it is a horrendous thing that we all don't realize, because it doesn't happen directly to us. But again, Latina adolescents have the highest rate of attempted suicide in the nation. We continue to advocate for services on school sites. That's why my Mental Health in Schools Act, which I'm sure you've already seen, and not you will, and a sharing of the mental health resources so that people understand that there are now, hopefully in mental health parity, we know there are loopholes, we're trying to close those, be able to address the shortcoming of some of the insurance companies that don't want to deal with paying for mental health services. So the learning of the warning signs, that's critical, so that we all have an idea of what's happening to our coworkers, our family members, or dear ones. But the National Crisis Hotline, the 800-273-TALK, which is 8255, with 24-hour confidential hotline assisting veterans. And again, veterans also have a very high rate of suicide, as do college and university students. So thank you all very much, and I'll get off my band. Thank you very much for being here. Oh, just today I received some emails from my good friend Jill Diamond from the World Boxing Council. She's getting the promoters, the fighters, and staff to wear the green ribbon at every fight. So we got to thank the World Boxing Council.
Okay, before we start, a couple quick shout-outs. Grace mentioned the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. John Draper, raise your hand. John's from New York City. He's in charge of the whole national program, so thank you, John, for your leadership. And then Colleen Carr is with the Action Alliance and EDC, and I think actually John chaired the Lived Experience Task Force at the Action Alliance, and there are materials out front, so please pick up some materials there. Where's our friend Jonah Cunningham? Right here, Grace's right and left hand. So thank you very, very much. And then last but not least, one of our good friends, Marlene Anielski from Ohio, who is a state representative from Ohio. She lost her son to suicide several years ago, and she is a leader in the Buckeye State, and we applaud her. She's like Grace is to California and the nation. Marlene is to Ohio. So thank you very much. So without further ado, it's my extreme pleasure to introduce one of my favorite colleagues from New York City and Atlanta, Dr. Doreen Marshall, who is our Senior Director for Education and Prevention. So listen intently, and then there'll be time for Q&A. There's also lunch in the back, so please help yourself. Thanks.
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. I'm the Senior Director of Education and Prevention at the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. I'm also a psychologist, and I am a suicide loss survivor. I've been involved in suicide prevention since my fiance died by suicide in 1995. For those of you in the room that have ever thought about suicide, I want you to know I'm so glad you are here. Your lives matter. To tell you a little bit about suicide, over 40,000 people this year will die by suicide. That's about a person every 12.8 minutes. 90% of those who die by suicide are suffering from a mental health problem at the time of their deaths, whether diagnosed or not. Suicide affects individuals of all races, creeds, religions, ethnicities, income levels. There's no typical person who dies by suicide or who attempts suicide. We use the term lived experience to refer to those who have struggled with suicide in their lives. These can be individuals who have had suicidal thoughts, suicidal feelings, or have had suicidal actions such as a past suicide attempt. For some of those individuals, that struggle is current. For others, it's a past struggle, and then for many, it comes and goes throughout their lives. And you are going to hear the stories of three incredibly resilient individuals today. Those with lived experience are many of us. They are the people we come into contact with every single day. They are those who cut our hair, who serve our foods, who maybe drove us to this event. They are our colleagues, our family members, and our friends. The number of people in the United States with lived experience is in the millions, and we know that events like this are a way for us to open that dialogue with those with lived experience. And if we're going to prevent suicide, who can we better learn about suicide from than those who are living with the experience of suicide? Our organization, AFSP, has a goal of a 20% reduction in suicide by the year 2025. And one way we are going to do this is to engage with partners, but also to engage those with lived experience to help us learn about the experience of suicide. So if you're asking yourself, well, what can I do? There are a few things we'd like you to do today. We want you to recognize being suicidal or a suicide attempt are incredibly resilient. These are not individuals that are permanently fragile, but rather they teach us a lot about how to live with difficulties, how to be resilient. We use language that's respectful, and that's certainly something you can do today. We say died by suicide versus committed suicide. We don't refer to attempts as successful or failed attempts. We use value-free language when it comes to that, with the only value being supporting life. We familiarize ourselves with resources such as those that we have at AFSP, also the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, the 1-800-273-TALK number. It's important to note that our reactions to suicide are normal, that they are a combination and an outcry of our experiences, of stigma, of what we've learned in our families and in our communities about suicide and mental health issues. Those feelings can evoke a sense of fear and helplessness. And what I'd encourage each of you to do as you hear the stories today, and as you hear people in your lives talk about their lived experience, is to move toward it, not away from it, to learn from it, to engage it, and to not be afraid to have the open dialogues. To tell you a little bit about AFSP, we are the largest nonprofit focused on suicide prevention. We fund scientific research. My role at AFSP, we offer education programs such as school-based programs to help teachers learn about how to prevent suicide in their students. We focus on public education, and then of course in John's role, we work with promoting policies and legislation that impact suicide. So with that, I'm going to introduce our panel, and I encourage you to just really listen to their amazing stories of resilience and hope. To my left is Taryn Aiken. Taryn is the board chair and the founding member of the AFSP Utah chapter. Next to Taryn is Brandon Marsico. Brandon is co-chair and one of the founding members of the AFSP South Central Pennsylvania chapter. Brandon has also spoken about his lived experience at our Out of the Darkness walk. And then my colleague Shelby Rowe is the AFSP Education and Prevention Manager at our national office. She is also the past president of AFSP in the chapter in Arkansas. We are thrilled to have them join us today and to share their wisdom. Okay, Taryn, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Wow, I feel very tall. Good afternoon. My name is Taryn Aiken. I certainly don't need a microphone. I speak very loudly. It's an honor to be here with you today and share just a little bit of my story and what brought me to AFSP. I grew up in Utah. I grew up in the dominant religion there. For those of you that don't know, it's LDS, aka Mormon. At the age of 8, I underwent a ritual in our religion of being baptized, being washed clean of my sins, because I had so many by age 8. At age 8, there was a really profound experience that happened. I began being sexually abused by a neighbor. There was also another very profound experience that happened at that same time frame. I walked into my parents' bedroom and found my father of a drug overdose that I would later learn was his first attempt at suicide. However, he did live through that. The experience of what had happened to me at age 8 is profound, because that, I believe, was the turning point of my mental health and the turning point for who I viewed I was, what my value was here on this earth, and what I would experience over the next 25 years of my life. At age 12, I experienced my first suicide attempt, utilizing things in my own home, a lot of what I had witnessed as a young girl. My father was an alcoholic. However, in the LDS religion, you don't drink alcohol anymore. So his alcohol changed forms, as we know most addicts do. It became prescription drug medication. My father suffered severe depression and battled anxiety. But again, as a man, that wasn't something we talked about. He was supposed to be the strong one. He was supposed to be the one that took care of all of us. So he wasn't allowed to show weakness and kept those things very secret and very private. And over the course of my life, I watched him experience a lot. The attempt I had at age 12 put me into the hospital. And I'm very grateful for that experience, because for the first time I was able to share what had been happening to me sexually. And when they brought my mom and dad in and had me tell them what had been going on, my mother did the best she could. I know that now. But she said, "I'm sorry that happened to you, but we're going to move on and forget about it, and I don't want you to talk about it again." And unfortunately, as a young child, it taught me a powerful lesson. It taught me that when bad things happen, nobody cares. And when bad things happen, you keep it quiet. So I lost my voice that day. I started using drugs and alcohol as a means of coping with what had become depression in my own mind. I hated myself. I loathed myself. I thought I had done something wrong. And over the course of the next 25 years, I continued to use drugs and alcohol as a way of coping and getting through life. I also watched my father do the same thing. When I was 26 years old, I was at work at JCPenney when the police showed up. And they said, "Are you Taryn Aiken?" And of course I looked around and went, "Oh hell, why?" "Can we talk to you?" I said, "No, whatever you got to tell me is right here, because there's a door I can run. I'm not sure why they're there." The police officer shared with me that my father had been shot. My brain said, "In a drive-by?" I live in Utah, okay, no, not a drive-by. He informed me that he had shot himself and was at the emergency room and he needed to take me to him, so I went. Again, he survived that attempt. My father at this point was losing everything. He had gone through now his third marriage. He had lost his job, he had lost his income, he had lost his home, he had lost his cars. I basically watched my father sell everything out of his home as he sat on the stairs. Thank you, I'm a crybaby. Several years later, my dad would attempt again. and October 5th of 2002, I found him dead of a drug overdose. That was a profound day for me. It was a day that my heart and spirit were broken because I knew that what I was seeing was real, but my heart didn't want to believe that he was gone. And I begged him and shook his lifeless body for what seemed like hours until emergency help arrived and confirmed to me what I already knew. I also vowed then and there that day that I would do anything and everything possible to help other people so that nobody else had to lose their dad. I'm a single mother. I have 2 children. I struggled even after he died with my own thoughts of suicide again, wondering how I could go on. How was I to live without him? How was I going to do this? And thank goodness I sat at my computer one night and Googled suicide, looking for support, looking for other people who had been where I had been. And I found AFSP. I began the process to found and bring a chapter to our state because in Utah, like most things, we don't say the S word. We don't say lots of S words, suicide being one, sex being the other, because if we talk about it, they do it, right? Well, if you were anything like me, you were doing it anyway. You just didn't know. So I founded, with the help of some great other survivors, our Utah chapter, and have become a passionate advocate for suicide prevention and mental illness and wellness. I'm a recovering alcoholic. On June 23rd, God willing, I'll celebrate 2 years of sobriety. And that's only because I've learned how and found a program where you can talk about it. It's an anonymous program, but I'm not anonymous. I celebrate recovery because it's how we live today. It's how we get through hard things. We own our part. We acknowledge that we're sick. We talk about people. I found my voice again. And it's a voice that will not be quiet. It's a voice that I don't know how to shut up now, although most people wish I would. But I'm just really grateful to be able to share just a portion of my story today and want to give time to these other amazing folks. But if I could leave any message with you, it would be this, that the one ingredient we lose as human beings when we get to that dark, desperate point where we think that everybody would be better off and that our lives are so unmanageable that there's no way of going on is hope. We lose hope. And hope is the thing that we can each give back to each other. And hope is the thing we can help those that we love who are struggling to find. Because I know that hope saves lives. It saved mine. Anyway, I thank you for your time today, and I'm going to bring up my good friend, Brandon Marsico.
Thanks again, everybody, for being here. Like Taryn said, we truly appreciate you being here to hear our stories. Taryn gets me emotional, so I apologize. Our stories mimic each other pretty profoundly, subtracting from me the loss of my father to suicide. We were both victims of sexual assault. Both grew up in areas where we didn't really talk about things as they were happening. It was just swept under the rug. I went from being a homeless child to growing up and starting the chapter here in the South Central Pennsylvania area. Naturally, being the one with lived experience or an attempt survivor, if you will, I find suicide to be important everywhere. It's not just something you talk about in a room with a group of people. It's not just something that you talk about amongst your friends. I have a whole section of my desk at work that's dedicated to AFSP and has trinkets and marketing materials and just ways for people to know that hope saves lives, like Taryn said earlier. How can that help you guys? We have a program with AFSP in our education department that's called More Than Sad, and it's just that. If somebody is in their desk or at their office and they just seem amiss or something doesn't seem right to them, don't hesitate to reach out to them and just ask them how they're doing, if everything's okay. There have been times where I've been on the streets and I've just noticed somebody just had that I need a hug look on their face, and I've walked up to them and asked them how they're doing. Sometimes I get I'm fine, sometimes I get thank you, I just needed somebody to ask, and then sometimes I get the situation I had to deal with last week where a mother who had actually just lost her son to suicide the week prior. And nobody had reached out to her. She didn't know what to do. She couldn't talk about it with her family. She couldn't talk to her about her friends. We'll just use the name Bobby. Bobby just wasn't there anymore, and she didn't know how to cope. And it was a resource that she needed, just with a random smile and a hug. You never know how far that can go. I'm huge on random acts of kindness because I got to a point where I didn't feel like there was any kindness left anymore. I'd lost my kind heart. I lost my happiness. I also was 12 years old at my first suicide attempt, also with drugs. Gladly unsuccessful, and then fast forward to 19, everything went downhill again in my mind, and there I was again, drug addict, addicted to alcohol, addicted to drugs, and attempting my last suicide. Growing up in a very rural area of central Pennsylvania, mental health is just something that you don't discuss. You don't talk about being sad, or it's not cool for guys to talk about their mental health problems or say the D word, depression or mental illness or bipolar disorder. But it's important that that gets talked about now. And as an adult, I'm so glad that I found AFSP because I do have that avenue now and that outlet to go to. I came on board to AFSP. I'm strictly 100% a volunteer. Came in as a fundraiser, walking in the overnight walk, which is held now twice a year. We're getting ready to do our next walk in Boston. Even today, meeting with a couple senators and their staff, we found people who are participating in events like that, and that's a great way to help end the stigma. If none of you have heard about the walks, I'm very passionate about them because it does bring communities together throughout the country. I think there was over 350 last year. I organized our local walk in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and we were actually the most improved walk. So it's just an idea of how people with lived experience are engaging other people in their community and doing some good things. The overnight walk, which is another love of mine, is an 18-mile walk done overnight every year. We're doing it in 2 cities. They just completed Dallas, and again, like I said, Boston will be coming up shortly. Any way to help end the stigma is the best way to prevent suicide. There are far too many people who just can't talk about it, won't talk about it, don't feel they need to talk about it. We had the National Take Your Children to Work Day event in my office a few weeks ago, and I was sitting there talking to a mother, and she had asked me simply about my bracelet and what it meant. So we got to discussing how it's about suicide prevention and bringing it out of the darkness. And she shared with me a story that her son had told her that he was depressed and he wasn't feeling well mentally, but she wasn't going to worry about it until he started cutting. That was the terminology that she had used. And we had a very, very detailed conversation following that, just because it's important that when our friends, our family, our children, cousins, brothers, uncles talk about how they're feeling about suicide and that it's a possibility for them, that we do reach out to them and don't just sweep it under the rug. I'll close with a saying that's kind of been emanating today. They don't know us, they can't show us until they know us. And basically what that means is just nobody knows what you're going through if you're not showing them. So just make sure that you're reaching out, talking to your friends, family, colleagues, and letting them know that it's okay to talk about mental health and suicide as a whole. So that'll be all I'll share for today, and I'll bring up the wonderful Shelby Rowe.
First off, I managed to make it up here without tripping over a single cord, so that was good. Hopefully I'll continue without knocking anything over. Not the most graceful people. This morning on Facebook, I was sharing with some of my friends that, hey, I'm a little nervous. I'm going to be doing this panel discussion on Congress. And I have this lovely friend of mine named Diana, and she said, I'm so proud of you, Shelby. Just know that all of the 22-a-day Gold Star mothers have your back, and we're all praying for you. And I said, thank you for helping reshape that, because I am really, really lucky that I get to be here. For each person who dies by suicide, there are 25 who survive. I'm one of the lucky ones, so I get to come and speak at events like this, and they do not. So hopefully with my voice can help speak loud enough for them as well. I have worked in public health for over 20 years. No, I didn't start when I was 10. I'm older than I look. But I've worked in public health for over 20 years, and I think I'm pretty good at it. Since 2007, I've been working in suicide prevention extensively. In 2010, I had the best year of my career up until moving to New York. But in 2010, I had helped write our state plan for suicide prevention. I had helped launch online crisis chat in our tiny little state of Arkansas. We were one of the first states to launch that. There were a lot of really wonderful things happening in my state that I had helped play a lead role in, and I was thrilled. And then things in my personal life started to fall apart. But I thought, it'll be okay. Yes, I'm going through a divorce. Yes, I have a child in a mental health crisis. I thought, I'm good at this. I teach coping skills. I run the statewide suicide hotline. I know how to do this. I debrief police officers and firemen when they're scared. I have this. I was very bold. And, I really didn't tell that many people in my life that when I was early, young, I have PTSD. I had some really traumatic things happen early in my life. But I thought, I had healed. I thought I was all better. I thought, flashbacks won't happen to me. I know how to cope. I'm good. This will never happen to me. And that arrogance almost cost me my life. I went through an acute PTSD flashback and didn't want to talk about it. I would talk about what was happening currently with my divorce and my son, but to explain PTSD would mean that I would have to talk about those traumatic events, and I didn't want to talk about those traumatic events. And so my friends were confused, my colleagues were confused, and I was panicking and spiraling down and didn't know how to ask for help. I did reach out for help, finally, but I went to another state because, again, my arrogance was going to cost me my life. I had trained a lot of the people in my community who did needs assessment, who did crisis intervention, and so walking in as one of their clients was beyond what I could do. And so I went to the next state. Fortunately, I called and told them I went, got good care. But again, when I was there, I sat and the psychiatrist said, well, why are you here? Have you ever been diagnosed with a mental health condition? And I said, well, I have PTSD. They said, well, why do you have PTSD? And I said, well, and I got started, to tell that first tragedy, because you always know that people aren't really interested in your personal story. And unfortunately, we would love to think that everyone is, but they aren't. And so I started with the first, well, my husband was killed in an accidental shooting when I was 19. And he goes, well, did you witness it? And I said, well, no. And he goes, well, then you probably don't have PTSD. So I said, okay, maybe not. And so the rest of the time I was there in the hospital for 6 days. I didn't tell anyone about my PTSD. And so they were treating me for symptoms, but not really getting to the core. So I left the hospital more sick than I went in with a bill. So now I owe money. Had to have a wonderful discussion with my ex-husband on if I was a suitable parent. When I came back, talked with my board, my staff about continuing my therapy. My board of directors at the crisis center were fabulous. My staff were clearly scared because their fearless leader was not well. I was really not well. So, fast forward a month and a half, there was, a triggering event, and my life spiraled down, and I made a suicide attempt the night before Thanksgiving in 2010. I woke up a couple days later, and I asked my kids, why didn't you take me to the hospital? And I said, well, Mom, we were scared you would get fired. And I was like, whoa. It's like, okay. So I needed to change a lot of things. And then I was like, I was like, this is my life-threatening health crisis. I cannot be arrogant about this anymore. Yes, I'm very blessed. There are many people with PTSD that they have flashbacks daily. Every day is a struggle with their fight or flight instinct. Mine are very random, knock on wood. It requires a new tragedy to trigger that. So it may be 5 years from now. It could be tomorrow. Hopefully it's never. Hopefully I've built a big enough support system now to where that won't happen again. I never want to be suicidal again. I want to build a good enough support system with healthy coping skills, with the right people in my life. And part of staying safe is doing really awkward things like this. because it increases that pool of individuals that know them at risk, because I am calm, cool, and collected all the time. I joke, that I'm terminally pleasant. With all 3 of my children, when I went to the hospital to give birth, they didn't believe me because I was still friendly and talking, and it's just my personality. But that's a risk factor for me. So I need people to know, I need to be open about my vulnerabilities so that I can stay safe. I do hope, and takeaway message is those individuals in your life that, that no one is immune. They can be successful and articulate. They can be experts in any field. We would never say, well, I can't believe that heart surgeon had a heart attack, Can't believe they would be affected by that. And for some reason in mental health, we let that be a barrier for us. We think, well, that can't happen to us. Really, none of us are immune. It is a humbling experience. We can all be at risk. We all need to look out for our friends and colleagues. So never assume that someone is okay because of their professional training. It is a health crisis. And I can say, be on the other side, it is very much a life-threatening health crisis. Your brain is not working properly at that moment. But the survival instinct is strong, and I'm so glad I had a chance to live. Can't wait to meet my husband's wives and my grandkids and all that wonderful stuff. But it will take a lifetime of conscious effort to stay safe, because I do not want to be one of those statistics. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Doreen and John. We are free to answer any questions that you all have. But thank you for coming today.
Well, I hope you would agree that our panelists have really shared the inner part of their soul and what they've experienced. Any questions from the audience? Anybody? Grace?
Is it true that the more you share, the more you speak, the more you're able to deal with your issues?
Yes, I would say very much so. I heard it said once that you can't hate someone once you know their story. And I think that's very true. And I think, just like anything, the thoughts sometimes that we have in our brain, if your brain's like mine, it can be a real dick. And so sometimes the thoughts we have in our brain, if we don't get them out, by communicating it, it loses its power. But as long as I keep it in here, I'm trapped, and it can get pretty scary and pretty ugly. So I absolutely think the freedom and the healing that's taken place and being able to verbalize what's happened and gone through it has taken away some of its power for me.
Yeah, I'll completely mimic everything Taryn said, minus a few words. When I was asked last year to speak at the Philadelphia overnight about my story, it had really been the first time that on a grand scale in front of, 1,500, almost 2,000 people participated in the overnight in Philadelphia. I had spoke about it locally at our little walks to 200, 300 people. And I've just came out about my suicide attempts within the last 4 years. It wasn't something that we talked about in my family. It wasn't that they were ashamed of it, but it was just that I had so many other things that I'd come out about in the past that I just didn't want to deal with that stigma once again. So talking about it and getting it out, it really helps. And it's my partner's mother actually explained it to me in a way the other day that it was so profound that she, luckily now she's in remission from breast cancer, and you can talk about the breast cancer, and there's the whole show your boobies thing, but I can't go like this and show you all that I have a mental illness. And I mean, physically it's not possible, and metaphorically there's a stigma that says don't talk about being depressed and having bipolar disorder or PTSD or anything of the sort. So 100% I think for me, and I'll agree with Taryn, that it really helps talking about it.
I would say that it's not talking about it. It's the kind, understanding reception of the listeners. Because coming out, we all have lots of days in our lives. There are those proud moments we would love to tell you about. Trying to kill myself is not one of those proud moments. It is hard, awkward, uncomfortable every single time. If there was a heart monitor on me, you would that it's not comfortable, but it helps to disprove that inner voice that is telling you can never tell anyone that. All of the mean things that you say to yourself, every time that we do this, it disproves that. So that is what's healing, not me sharing, But you all being understanding and supportive, that's the most healing thing. So thank you.
The other thing, can I add, this panel spoke at our National Chapter Leadership Conference this past January in Atlanta. So I asked Taryn to clean up her presentation, but now I'm sorry that I did, but would you mind sharing with the group what you shared with the folks in Atlanta about the conversations you have with your brain?
Oh, yeah,
And
for sure.
give people a sense of what you do every day with yourself before you have a conversation with anybody else.
Sure. You know, I just shared, and again, if your brain is anything like mine, again, as an alcoholic, my brain will have me and my brain will kill me if I'm not vigilant every single day. I had used the term my brain is an asshole because it is. My brain, because from that time I was 8 years old, I programmed it to believe I was worthless, I was a piece of shit, I had no value, I didn't matter. That is the dialogue I have told myself. I'm 39 years old. You know, I've said that for 31 years. Those neural pathways are pretty deep and pretty entrenched. It has taken a long time, and I'm still actively working on that process of shifting the way I've thought about myself. The process of recovery and what I've learned and gained through going through the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous has enabled me to be open. So I want to share something that I shared just with my sponsor a few weeks ago that truly freed me. When I experienced the sexual abuse for the first time, I experienced an orgasm. So of course, in my body, I thought, what is wrong with me? I know this is wrong, but my body felt something different. What is wrong with me? And I've carried that hatred because I thought there was something wrong with me. And I know that now, no, I experienced what my body was exposed to. But again, being young, I was so confused, and that has kept me sick. To finally be able to verbalize that out loud to somebody else freed me. So again, the truth will set you free. I believe that 100%. Sorry, thank you.
John?
Just a comment and then a question. First of all, thank you all so much for having the courage to give us your voices, to give us your stories, to give us your hope, and to give us your inspiration. So first, thank you. There are a lot of people now who are in our community who've been so inspired by your voices and the voices of others who are talking more about their experience, and it is very important. We know actually those voices of hope can really reduce suicide. There's actually studies that show that. But our question that we're having a lot, and a lot of our conversations in our community now is, how do you know when you're ready? And so my question for you all is, as you went through the process of making the decision to talk about it, and then when you finally did, obviously there's been amazing dividends for you and others. But what kind of advice might you give to those who are on the precipice or thinking about, talking about their story? What warnings might you give? What caveats might you give? What advice might you give?
Go. You go.
Like I shared earlier, it's a coming out of sorts. It's just something that's not, again, and I think I'll say this till I'm blue in the face, it's just not talked about. And as I said earlier, you're engaging people who have lived experience and just reaching out to people. It's going to help them share their story, just knowing that there are people out there who not only can empathize with them or have the compassion for somebody who has lived experience, but just knowing that there's somebody who's going to listen. My feelings was that nobody wanted to listen to that story. It was boring. It wasn't something that you wanted to talk about. It wasn't getting me an award. It wasn't making me any money. It was just something in my life that had happened, and I just chose not to really discuss about it. But like I said, I think knowing that there are people who are going to listen to you is probably the best advice that I can give you, is when you talk, people are going to listen. Some people are afraid that there's not anybody going to listen. There's nobody going to be there. There's no audience, and what's the point of talking in an empty room by yourself? So just the best advice that I can give them would just be know that there are people who are willing to listen, who want to listen, and there are people who need to listen. There's somebody who spoke that helped me tell my story, and I'm hoping that my story will help those people who just feel like nobody's out there and there's nobody listening. There's no more hope, that there is hope, and you can talk about it because there are people willing to listen. And if there are not people willing to listen, make them listen.
I think mine, and I just recently, I guess over the summer, it's been less than a year that I've been sharing my story publicly, and it started as a result of the Way Forward report that came out of the National Action Alliance. Sally Spencer Thomas, who played a role in that, she contacted me going, hey, will you make a video? And I said, well, I will, but I want you to know that I'm not an ally, I am an attempt survivor. And she and I, being two professionals in the field, going over all of the safe messaging guidelines. And, one of the things that was really crucial to me was before I recorded my little 30-second video, I contacted all 3 of my children. I contacted my best friend. I contacted my mom, because it's not just my story. My story affected everyone else's lives. And so for new people that are thinking, I want to tell my story, to take care of that personal support system. So don't sacrifice your own support system to help others. It's kind of like, on an airplane, the oxygen mask, put on your mask first. And so I needed to make sure that my support system, because sharing my stories to help others is worthless if it destroys me. And so my terminology that I used to call it, whenever I give these presentations, I call it doing emotional burlesque. That I share enough, that I share enough of me intimate and compelling that I feel like you guys know and get a sense of who I am, but I protect my core and I change it. You could hear me tell my story 50 times and it's going to be different each time depending on what I'm comfortable, because I can't go home and feel naked or exposed. I need to protect. So knowing yourself and knowing that your support system will be there for you is very important.
I just wanted to add something. I think I spoke with an attempt survivor recently who, when I asked her what made her reluctant to share that part of her with other people, she said it's because they asked me why. And she said, I still don't know why I got there. And she said, it's not a simple answer. I don't have a simple answer, and it's hard for me to share that without people asking it. So I think the one thing that I've learned is when people do share is to not press them for why, that they may not understand why, and be respectful about what they do want to share about their history with you.
I do have a thought I would add. I think for me it's just being in a space and place where you're healthy, and like Shelby said, is self-care, knowing that it is emotional, it does expose you, your vulnerability of sharing some of those things. You've got to be in a place where you're actively working. I actively work recovery every day because my brain will still have thoughts. My brain still some days has the thought that says, you don't matter, you're not worth it. And so I think just being in a place and knowing that you are going to be exposed to some of that vulnerability when you do share, and knowing what self-care actions you can take. And I want to echo what she shared. My mom is one of my greatest heroes. My mom did the best she could. She didn't intend malice in what she said to me. She was a mom. I'm a mom. If my child came to me and was being abused, I don't know how I would have reacted either, So I just think the purpose of what we learn and go through and experience is huge. But I always encourage folks who say, I want to share my story. I want to make sure they're in a safe place to do so, so that it isn't detrimental to their own mental well-being also. So.
Yeah, I think clearly, if I could add, having lost my sister to suicide, it's part of the gift of forgiving yourself, forgiving your mom for not knowing what to say, but it doesn't mean she was a bad person, right? And that each of us have to find our own way. And to Shelby's point about protecting your network of support, it's critically important to do that. Any other questions? Anybody have some thoughts? Morning.
I was just wondering, I'm a state rep from Ohio, and we have passed several laws, or in the process of passing laws, to basically help educational facilities, so whether it's K to 12 or for colleges. And also there's another law that claims September 10th as Suicide Prevention Day. Yeah. So it corresponds to the National Day and the Worldwide Day. I'm just wondering, is there anything that your particular state is doing that is working really well that you would like to see other states copy? Give you credit,
Oh, yeah.
but you'd like to see, with other states.
I would. I'll speak first. Just on Monday, I attended a ceremonial bill signing where our governor signed 5 new pieces of legislation. We funded a couple years back 2 positions, one at the Division of Substance Abuse and Mental Health, and then the State Office of Education, full-time suicide prevention. We saw that when New York did that, they reduced suicide, dramatically. So to have 2 people in state government actively working, and our State Office of Education lady, we joke, she is boots on the ground. That woman is in every school. As soon as she hears of a suicide, she's there. I mean, we just have seen huge things happen. The other one that's been huge was providing training for mental health providers, for folks who've gone through and are working with individuals in suicidal crisis. Sometimes they haven't even had the training. So seeing that happen, at a national level would be huge. And then just funding. I mean, we can say it till we're blue in the face. We need funding to provide research so that we can better understand what's causing suicide. How do we get ahead of this? We haven't put the money towards it at state levels, at a national level. AFSP, we're out there walking our butts off 18 miles. I got the blisters to prove it from Dallas. Still going, why am I in heels? But no, I think there's so much we can continue to do at a state level, and I'm amazed at what our state in Utah has done. But it's taken, as you know, being personally affected. Those are the people that are pushing the most because they've been affected. And let's get on the front end of this. Instead of waiting till we've been affected, let's implement change now. Can't this be a conversation we have now, before we're reacting? So that would be my thoughts.
To go to a more thing, in Pennsylvania, we had passed 1559, Act 71, which actually requires teachers to have suicide prevention education training across the state. And we're pushing more than SAD, which I spoke about earlier, as a tool for that, to give that training to the teachers. And I think that's very important to get our children at a younger age to talk about it and to have their educators and the people they spend 6 to 8 hours, sometimes more, a day with. And that works with not only teachers, but administration. It can work for coaches of sports and everything else too. So to go to a more specific level, I would say getting the training or passing a bill to require the training within the education department that would require them to have some type of training for mental health or suicide prevention, more than SAD, would be a research-based, very successful program to get into your state.
Yeah, I live in Georgia. We just passed the act that Brandon was talking about, the Jason Flat Act, which requires teacher training in suicide prevention. So it's a huge thing. The other thing related to research, one of the things many people, I'm a psychologist, and what many people don't understand is that our understanding of suicidal behavior is like where our understanding of heart disease was in the 1960s. We really need funded research to understand this at the national level, to move us forward so that we can prevent it.
I'll just say I can speak to Arkansas, which is where I lived before. I've only been a New York resident since November. But in Arkansas, one thing that we did, aside from the Jason Flat Act, which we had, was through our trauma system, launched into some comprehensive training of our ED nurses. It's a crucial role. We tell individuals if you're at risk to go to the emergency department, yet oftentimes these individuals have no training. So I love the initiatives that people are involved with, the zero suicide initiatives, but trying to train those nurses. And so to speak with an RN who can come to me and say, hey, that online training that you asked me to do? Yesterday, we had someone come through our ED, a 22-year-old young lady, and I responded so much better with her because I had that training. And I'm so glad. I know that our people that come through our ED at risk are going to be so much safer because of this training that we have. So doing that training to help train the nurses how to recognize someone in a suicidal crisis and respond to them appropriately. So that was a good effort, and I hope they're continuing that in Arkansas now that I'm not there.
Okay, I think we're going to ask the Congresswoman to wrap up, and then the panelists will be here. John is here, Colleen is here, so feel free to stick around and ask some questions. But Grace, why don't you close the program?
Well, we have votes coming up, so I really do have to go. But thank you so much for bearing yourselves.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
You were sharing a story with me about your son.
Marlene, why don't you share with the group real quickly what prompted you to
children, and Joe was my oldest, and he was 18 years old, a senior at St. Ignatius High School, and he took his life. We did not know there was any issue. 6'6.5", national championship rower, great sense of humor, tons of friends, hugged us all the time, home on time. It was just out of the ordinary, out of the ordinary. And at the time that I was mayor, I was also running for state representative, and he was already going door to door with me. And then, of course, I was approached, well, are you going to continue or are you not going to continue? And to me, I needed to be there for my other children. Needed to be there, you know, for my husband and, you know, my mom and my mother-in-law, and they're all of his friends. So with that, I saw the need for all of his friends at the high school. And after my kids sent them back to school, I went right to the high school, and I noticed that the kids were struggling because 6 months before that, my son rode on the crew team. They lost another team member that same year, and that happened to be an accident. So those kids were all struggling with 2 deaths of friends. And I thought, he needed help with school. He gotta help his friends. So I started there with helping the school and getting emergency counselors in there to help all of his friends. And then when I came to the State House, of course I met Clark Flatt. And ours is a little bit different. I think I think 4 states passed it by the time they came to me, and I ended up being the 11th state that passed it. And I said, I will pass it if it is the Jason Flatt Act in honor of Joseph Vinyalski. So I did that in memory of my son. And I also added that the training that the teachers can get and earn CEU credits, it can be any program, not just the Jason Foundation. To me, I wanted the training out there. I wanted the parents to get the training. I wanted the friends to get the training so people can recognize. And since then, you know, I've had one other one pass. I have one in the Senate now. It already passed the House, and I'm working on about 4 other bills that's going to help not only the kids, and I always go to the kids, also the veterans. And I do a lot with military personnel as well, because I think all of you know 20% of all the suicides are with the military personnel. So that is my story, and I will just continue moving forward, not only for the health and well-being of myself, but also my family, my children, who's also, my daughter is studying to be a psychologist as well. And I just think we need advocates out there to help all the other kids that are struggling, and people aren't listening to them. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again for all of you for attending. Please feel free to pick up lunch if you haven't gotten it yet, and come by and say hello to the panelists or to John or colleagues. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for all you're doing.
Thank you.